Hey, you guys. Welcome to my Tomes of Terror show. This is my little book review situation that I have going on that I put up every Monday. So, on this installment, we're going to be doing another book by Jack Ketchum. Now, I've done at least one of his before, maybe two. I can't remember. I did The Girl Next Door for sure, which, if you haven't read Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door, that is one of the most soul-crushing books you will ever read, and it's based on a true story. I don't remember if I've done any more, because I have several of his books. So if I haven't done another one other than The Girl Next Door, then I will eventually get around, because I'm pretty sure I have Off Season, and I have a couple other ones too. Because I really, really like Jack Ketchum. But this book right here is one that, this came out back in 1995. And I remember seeing it in the bookstore because in the late 1990s, I was actually buying a bunch of kind of leisure paperbacks. And they usually had kind of a lot of, what used to be called splatterpunk type stuff, or kind of more extreme horror. You had, Jack Ketchum, you had Richard Lehman, you had Douglas Clegg, Edward Lee, people like that. So I was buying a lot of those around this time. And I actually remember, I'm pretty sure I remember being in Barnes & Noble, probably like sometime in the late 90s, early 2000s, and picking this book up and not buying it because I thought it would be too much of a bummer because of what it was about, because animals, you guys. But so I never did read it. I read most of Jack Ketchum's other stuff, but I never did get around to reading this one. But then I noticed that it was on, recently I noticed it was on Kindle Unlimited. So I was like, what the hell? I'll pull the trigger on that and see if it's really good, because it has like really, really excellent reviews. And I have to say that this was pretty amazing. It is a bummer. Like, it's the Jack Ketchum we're talking about. Like, all his stuff is kind of a bummer, because, the dude writes... I think the way that he writes, his style is just so kind of like matter of fact and not, there's no kind of like frills or anything on it, no bells and whistles. And he just, like, everything, the shittiest stuff happens, and then it just gets shittier and shittier and shittier. And you're just kind of like hoping that, you'll get to the end. It's like, will there be a light at the end of the tunnel? Will there be some good out of this? Not usually. So, like, bad shit's gonna happen. This book actually does have a sort of happy-ish ending, I will say that. But generally, like, some really, really terrible shit happens in this. Now, I will say this book, as I said, came out in 1995. And if you get the paperback and if you get the ebook, which is the one that I read, this also has another novella appended to the end of it, which is called The Passenger. So I'm going to talk about that too. That's like, it was like 120 pages, something like that, at the end. So it's almost kind of like two books in one, to be honest with you. And The Passenger is like way nastier than Red was, but I'll get into that in a minute. So Jack Ketchum, if you don't know, he unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago in 2018. That actually wasn't his real name. It was a pen name. His real name was actually Dallas Mayer, I believe. But yeah, so sadly he passed away. But if you haven't ever read any Jack Ketchum, you really should, because he's something else. He's actually one of my favorite horror writers. And The Girl Next Door, probably the one to start with, unless... you want to like maintain your faith in humanity, then probably don't read it. But that's probably the one to start with. But all of his shit is great. Like, pretty much every book that I've read of his is great, and this one is great too. And I'm actually really sorry that I didn't read it back in the day, because I guess I thought, when I read the back, when the description on the back, I was just kind of like, well, I don't know if I want to read something that's that, because even back then I was kind of like sensitive about bad stuff happening to animals. And I don't give it, like I said, I don't give a shit what you do to people in horror movies or horror books or anything. Just, fuck them all up. And it doesn't usually bother me all that much. But the second something happens to like a kitty or a doggy or something, I'm just kind of like, nope, I don't want to read about that. But so I will say that if you're very sensitive to fucked up shit happening to animals, then maybe give this one a pass, because some pretty fucked up shit happens to animal in it. So I'm just going to say. So the story of Red is about this guy. His name is Avery, and he lives in this small town. He's kind of like an older guy. He's like in his 60s, and he is a widower. And he has kind of like, just a very quiet life. He runs like a general store in this little town, and he just has his house, and he just kind of, like I said, he's a widower. His wife died, and he's just been kind of living by himself. It's just him and his dog, Red, and they just kind of go fishing and hang out at the thing. And everyone in the town kind of knows him, and he's just like a really likable older dude, just living out the rest of his days in peace and quiet. So him and Red are out fishing one day. And, he's caught a couple fish, having a good day. It's all nice and quiet. And then all of a sudden, these 3 fucking snot-nosed teenagers turn up. And this is like really the first few pages of the book. And this scene is just like so tense because you really know like something bad's going to happen, and you're just kind of like waiting for it. Like your stomach is just kind of like coiled because this is going to go bad. Even though the kids, they walk up with like a rifle and they say, yeah, they've been out like hunting or shooting in the woods or whatever. And at first they seem kind of like friendly, but Avery is really wary of them because he's kind of like, yeah, I don't like the way this is fucking going. Like they seem to have a little bit of an attitude. So as it goes on, they're kind of like asking him questions about his fish and about all this other stuff. And then they start with what they really came for, which is they just want to like rob him. So he's like, look, he knows who the kids are, because like I said, this is kind of a small town. And these are kind of like the town rich kids, pretty much. So, and they're just kind of out there dicking around. I guess they're supposed to be like maybe 16, 17, something like that. They're like high school students. So he's like, look, I don't want any trouble. I got a wallet. It's in my truck. There's maybe $20 in it. Just take it. It's fine. He doesn't want any trouble, like I said. So the kids are just kind of like, oh, well, that's not really enough, blah, blah, blah. And then, I hate to tell you, but just for shits and giggles, these kids just straight up blow off the dog's head. Just because they can and because they think it's funny. So one of them does it, and then like the other teenagers, like one of them kind of looks like, oh man, that was fucked up. But then the other one they're just like laughing about it. So his beloved dog, Red, who he's had for a very long time, who I believe his wife gave to him, much like in, in John Wick fashion. His wife gave him the dog. So he's had this dog for a really long time and was his companion. And these just brats just came along and just blew the dog's head off for no reason at all. Because like I said, they didn't even need the money or anything like that. So from there follows... As I said, you're going to get like John Wick vibes, although this came out like a long time before that, but it's not really like that. It's a much quieter story because honestly, at first, all Avery wants, he doesn't want money. He doesn't want revenge. He doesn't want to like turn the kids inside out or anything like that, which makes him a better man than me because that's what I would do. But at first, all he wants is he just wants them to take responsibility. He wants them to be sorry. And he wants to go. So the first thing he does is he tries to do the right thing, and he goes to the cops, and then he goes to the kids, the kid that shot his dog. It was him and his brother, and then their friend. So he goes to the kid's dad, and is basically like, hey, this is fucked up. Your kids came across me when I was fishing. They tried to rob me, and then they blew my dog's head off. And I really liked that dog. And, so I would really appreciate it if they would take responsibility for that, if they would just say they were sorry and, if they would learn that was a fucked up thing to do. So that's all he's asking for. Now, the kid's dad is one of these he's like a real estate developer dude, and he's kind of like this kind of stereotypical like rich asshole where he kind of started out as a redneck, but he made it good. So now he has all this money, and he's one of the wealthiest people in town, and he owns all this shit. And so he's basically like, my kids would never do that. Piss off, you stupid old man. What do you want? Money? Here, I'll give you some money. And he's like, look, I don't want your money. I just want your kids to like acknowledge that what they did was fucked up and, wanted them to apologize. But of course they won't. The kids just fucking deny it. We weren't even there, blah, blah, blah. So at this point, as I said, the one thing I like about this story is that Avery is like such a nice man, and he's just like a really good character. He's just like a regular older guy. He was just like living his life. And then these fucking, shitheads came and did this. And he doesn't even try to like I said, he doesn't try to punch him out or nothing like that. He tries to go the right way. He goes to their dad and that doesn't work out. And then he goes to the police and he's like, I know that nothing's going to come of this and everything, but I just want you guys to know that this happened. And he's like, I don't really want anything. I just want them to, face some consequences for what they did. He's like, I know that blowing a dog's head off, especially back then in 1995, it's like, it's not really going to really net you that much jail time, I guess. And like I said, it was just his word against theirs. They're denying that it happened. So as the story goes on, and he really is not getting any satisfaction, he ends up going to, well, he doesn't do this, but the media, or actually this woman that's like a reporter, she actually, who's local, she actually gets interested in the story, and she's like, man, this is fucked up. I really want to cover this. So she goes to him and convinces him to go to the media to get maybe something to happen on it. At which point, you will not be surprised to learn that the rich asshole and the kids and the friend, they pretty much amp up the shit. So it gets to a point where it's like a fucking blood feud. And like I said, Avery really only does bad shit when he gets pushed into it. I mean, the rich assholes like burn down his store, although he can't prove it. And it's like, so they start like essentially like maintaining like terror against him because of him trying to get, like I said, all he wanted was a fucking apology for killing his goddamn dog. And they won't even give him that. They won't even admit that they did it. They won't even admit that it was fucked up. And it's just kind of like, so it just keeps escalating and escalating and escalating until it's just this horrific situation that this poor old man got brought into. So that's essentially the whole entire story. It's like a revenge story, but it's, as I said, it's kind of like a much quieter one, and it takes like a long time for shit to like build up, but it just builds up, just ratchets up very, very slowly. Everything just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And I'm not going to spoil how it ends because I really do think people should read this, but I will say that it does have like a somewhat happy ending, at least compared to like a lot of other Jack Ketchum stuff that I've read. So there is that. But as I said, this is it's pretty messed up, and if you really do not like anything in stories that has anything to do with fucked up shit happening to animals, then this is really going to bother you. And it happens like almost immediately at the beginning of the story because it's kind of the inciting incident. So I mean, it bothered me thinking about it, and but I read the story anyway, and it's actually like a great story because and Avery is just such a great character because he's just, as I said, he's just kind of this quiet older dude, and he gets put into this situation and he didn't want to be in that situation, but all he wants is for someone to acknowledge that what happened was wrong, and that why won't anybody take responsibility for it, and that's all he wants, and he can't even get that. So all of this horrible death and destruction kind of stems out of that. So it's actually a really good like character study of him, and also how just a regular nice person can get put into these extraordinary circumstances, and what kind of stems out of that. So it's actually like an excellent story. So as I said, at the end of the book, I believe if you get the print book, for sure if you get the ebook, because that's what I read, there's also another novella at the end, which is called The Passenger, which I'm assuming was written right around the same time. And this is also very good, much nastier. This is about a woman named Janet Morris, who is a defense attorney, and she has been defending this guy who apparently like shot a family or something like that. That's not kind of the main part of the story, although it does kind of tie in later on. But what ends up happening is that she is on her way home or something like that one night, and her car breaks down, and she ends up getting picked up by this young woman. And when she gets in the car, she realizes this young woman that she went to high school with her. And so she's like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in such a long time. But they weren't really friends because they were in different social circles. And that kind of makes a big there is kind of like an element of class in both of these stories now that I think about it, because Janet was kind of like a more cheerleader, wealthier, you know, upper class type girl, and like I said, now she's a defense attorney, so she's kind of wealthier, whereas this other girl, this other woman whose name is Marion, was more like a white trash type of thing, and it's like she's kind of stayed in this same small town and is turns out is kind of crazy. Actually, a lot crazy. Yeah. So as it goes on, there's this kind of, there's all of these, there's like 3 different tendrils. You have like Janet's story and her boyfriend who is, you know, trying like, he's cheating on her, but there's all this other kind of stuff going on with that. Then there's this thing with her and Marion, and then they meet up with these 3 dudes that are like criminals, and it goes, again, this is one that is like really, really fucked up. Like some really fucked up stuff happens. And I'm talking about trigger warning for like children being shot. All kind of like terrible shit happens over the course of this one night. And it's almost kind of like, because Janet got a ride with this woman which you'd think would be safe. And she's like, oh, hey, you know, I kind of remember you from high school. And you'd think that would be fine. Things are totally not fine. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, and you just will not believe, like, the crazy fucking shit that happens in this. And I kind of feel like toward the end, and like I said, I don't really want to spoil this because this is actually a really good story too. But it's like toward the end, it gets a little, I don't know if I'd say it's like unbelievable, but it does kind of like strain credulity a little bit, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe there's like crazier shit going on out there than I think. But it does kind of go in like some really, I don't even know how I want to spell. Well, it's just kind of like as it goes on, when they meet up with these 3 killers who end up like killing a cop, and then there's all this other kind of shit, and then they're like on the run and they have to keep stealing cars, and you know, they're just rape and murder, and it's just, so the worst possible shit happens in this. Like I said, rape, murder, whole entire families being shot, and then it just gets worse and worse. And then when it gets to the end where this place is, where this final confrontation is, there's just all kind, like the worst shit you can imagine is going on at this place. Not supernatural. It's not supernatural in any way. It's all like criminals, but it's just like like human trafficking, just whatever. The worst shit you can imagine is going on in this story. So there's that as well. So if you have not read any Jack Ketchum, like I said, this actually would probably be a good one to start with. And pretty much any one of them would be good to start with. But no, going in, he is known as a more like quote unquote extreme writer. So his stuff is very nasty. You know, terrible things happen to people in these, terrible things happen to animals. So that's going to bother you. And like I said, there's rape, there's just all kind of like terrible things going on. It's interesting because I think I brought this up before when I was talking about Richard Lehman, who is, I mean, usually those kind of guys are grouped together. Richard Lehman's stuff to me seems a little more like all of the fucked up shit in his is more meant to be titillating. Jack Ketchum's not so much. I never really get the sense that he's writing it. I mean, all the shit that happens in there is like really depraved, but I never get the sense, and I guess it's just his writing style, I never get the sense that he's enjoying it or getting off it. He's just showing it to you. You know what I mean? It's just very matter of fact. He's like, this is some fucked up shit that happens in the world, in real life. Because as I said, I don't actually remember. He might have done some supernatural shit, but his, you know, kind of wheelhouse was more real shit, you know, realistic shit going on, criminals and things like that. He was more interested in human monsters than supernatural monsters. I can't remember offhand if he'd written any supernatural stuff or not. Most of his stuff was human monsters, you know, particularly, like I said, The Girl Next Door. And so that was kind of like what he was fascinated about. But as I said, you never get the sense that he's writing about that, like, you know, to make you like get off on it or enjoy it anyway. It's always like kind of unpleasant. the way he puts it across, but it's still like really compelling to read, if that makes any sense. So yeah, so as I said, this novel, Red, the one about the dog, was actually made into a movie, which I didn't know, in 2008. I think Tom Sizemore was in it. I don't know if the movie was any good. I probably wouldn't watch it because reading about a dog getting its head blown off is bad enough. I certainly do not want to see it. But I kind of want to see it because I'm curious, because the book is really good. But I don't know. Maybe I'll get around to it. But they did make a movie out of it. They made a movie about a couple of his other ones too. Girl Next Door, I think they made into a movie twice, to be honest with you. And I think one of his other ones, maybe Off Season, was made into a movie too. But yeah, not a lot of his stuff was, unfortunately. But this one was. So if you want to see the movie, check it out. But I'm sure the book is better. But yeah, so that'll do it for this Tomes of Terror. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.